Hey everybody, it's Mr. Drop. It looks like I'm going to be out for a little while longer, but I wanted to keep the content rolling, so this will have to do for a while. And of course, I wanted to keep the jokes coming as well. Speaking of refined, remember that crude oil can be taken apart using fractional distillation to make all kinds of different products. We see that gasoline makes up 45% of the 42 gallons that come from a barrel of crude oil. When we add in the other common liquid hydrocarbons such as diesel and jet fuel, we now see that about 80% of a barrel of crude goes to transportation. Those of you who drive, and especially those who pay their own gas, know that prices can be all over the map. I definitely remember my parents paying under $1 for a gallon of gas in the 1980s. But there's a lot of reasons we sometimes see gas pushing as high as $4 or $5. The simplest driver of the market is, as in economics, supply and demand. But other things can play a role, such as problems at refineries or disruptions to the infrastructure due to natural disasters. And if you choose to live in geographically remote areas such as Hawaii or Iceland, you might have to get used to paying with family members, I guess. I guess this is why we're always in the search for a different type of uh, energy. Yeah, I'm not sure that's gonna work. Nope. Don't really have anything to add to this joke. And of course, if you do happen to find that really cheap gallon of gas, go ahead and pop off. Wow, I get way more laughs when I do the lesson this way instead of live in class. All right, back to serious stuff. So, the base price of a gallon of gas is always set by the cost of the barrel of crude oil. This is the price of a barrel from last Friday afternoon. You can see it's just over $52. This graph shows you that the price fluctuates quite a bit, and it's going all the way back to October of 2020. That huge dip that you see from March of last year is when everybody went into quarantine. We stopped driving and flying, and so there was no demand for oil. In fact, the demand for oil was so low that the cost dipped below $0. They were running out of places to even store the oil. This amazing picture shows a whole bunch of oil tankers just parked in the Gulf of Mexico. The refineries and gas stations were full. We'll talk later about what this decrease in fossil fuel usage did for our air quality. I'm not 100% sure, but it's possible last April that oil stocks were lower than toilet paper stocks. I honestly don't remember what GameStop was selling for at the time. Politics can also play a huge role in the price and availability of our fuel. This image is from the 1970s, when we were in the midst of an oil embargo, which meant the countries in the Middle East refused to trade with us. People often waited in lines for hours as cars lined all around the block. They were often told when they got to the pumps that they were out of gas or they could only buy a gallon. The United States has its own strategic oil reserves, but we often are reluctant to dip into it. That as well is driven by politics. So the amount of oil that the United States either produces or imports and exports have varied over the different political administrations. Here you can see over the decades the different events that have actually led to our current oil policies. Trade deals and wars often lead to spikes. Times of financial hardship lead to the dips. Notice that the overall trend starting about 2010, is a decline. That's due to the discovery of large reserves of oil products that we can get in the United States through the process of fracking. The Middle Eastern countries have usually had some leverage over setting the price of oil. But over the last few years, we have been able to become actually a net exporter instead of a net importer. Until the fracking boom, we were largely dependent on the prices set by a group called OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And you can see the majority of them are Middle East. We have not always agreed with the governments in a lot of these countries, and that has definitely led to conflict over the years. But just like the issues with rare earth mining, we were often willing to overlook things we disagreed with in the name of cheap oil and cheap energy. You can see from this graph that we have made a huge decline in our dependence from OPEC and other Persian Gulf nations. This is partly due to our own production, but notice the steady climb in imports from Canada. We're going to talk more later about tar sands, and that is the source of this Canadian crude oil. The Canadian tar sands are also the reason that the oil companies are pushing for the Keystone XL pipeline. It is the main source of distribution of the tar sands crude. Just to give you a little perspective of what this decline means, you go back to 2005, and we were spending over $350 million a day on OPEC oil. And currently, we've cut that in half. We now import about 3 million barrels a day, but that only costs us about $150 million. You can see why OPEC, receiving that much money, is so influential. Oh wow, look how hilarious and uniquely creative all of these Tesla owners are. That's a great joke. Wait a second, is that Grop's car? Never mind. See you guys next time. Have a good one.